I'm cheers in the wrong camera. I've got two cans. Cheers.
Cheers.
All
Now it's
right. Small group. So, Janine, what are you getting on this wine? What are you tasting?
super sweet, very delicious, tart. I like it. Very fresh, summery.
Yeah. And Mick, what are you getting on this? Oh, he's gonna pour it and taste it.
Yeah, I'm gonna pour it and I'll taste it. Sorry, like I said, I was
All
struggling.
right. So I've actually had this bottle open for an hour because I was multitasking, and I made some tapas and garlic shrimp with this, and it was a perfect pair because it had the right tartness to cut through some of the garlic. Has the yeah, definitely some nice sweet fruit going on as well, like a tart apple that I'm getting on this one. How about yourself, Mick?
Yeah, I'm not as much of the tartness for whatever reason. Like I don't know what I just ate or something, but to me it's like really smooth. It's good, but yeah, not overly tart. Um, I'm digging the smell too. It's like I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, I'm not getting as much of the tartness for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Could be a little different. Could be a little bit. Yeah. So it's great summer wine. So with that, I'd love to introduce the winemaker, Megan Bell from Margins Wine. Megan, why don't you tell us about this wine specifically, and then we can get into your background and talk about that.
Sure. So the 2019 is the first year that I made Chenin from Massa Vineyard in Carmel Valley. I've been making Chenin from Clarksburg for about 4 years now, but that is a bit totally different climate than Carmel, obviously. So it was kind of a fun experiment to figure out how that Chenin was going to be different from the previous Chenins that I've made. The main thing I was really excited about for that vineyard is that it's the only vineyard I work with where the vines are really old. So they were planted around 1968. And all of the other vineyards I work with were planted after 1990. So it's significantly older. And I feel like that really plays into like the natural balance of that wine. Especially compared to Clarksburg, where it's a little hotter and the vines they're not young, but they're younger, and I feel like I need to use like my winemaker's toolbox a little bit more on Chenin from Clarksburg in order to help balance out that wine, because it can often be like very linear and like straight mineral, whereas
Right. Sorry to interrupt. I want to ask a couple questions there. You're using some phrases that I would love to expand upon.
Yeah.
So let's first start with, I'll get back to linear in a moment, but I first want to start your toolbox. You mentioned a different part of your toolbox. So what part of the toolbox are you using in Clarksburg that you wouldn't necessarily need to use in Carmel with Massa?
Yeah. So with Clarksburg, a lot of times I find that if I'm not doing something to make it not like super almost pavement type of minerality, then it can come off as like very one-sided or like linear. And what I do to balance out the Chenin, the Clarksburg Chenin, is I stir every week for 6 weeks in the middle of the winter, and that helps kind of bulk up the palate a little bit so that there's a little bit more roundness and like something interesting happening instead of just being like acid water basically. Whereas the Carmel Valley Chenin is so round and flavorful and like almost too much is what I learned last year for the type of wine style that I'm trying to make. So what I ended up doing differently with the Carmel Chenin was aging it in stainless steel only and no oak, whereas the Clarksburg Shannon is in neutral oak. So I was trying to kind of down.
Oh, did she freeze out?
Oh no.
Oh no.
I thought it
She
was
was
me.
just about to give all the secrets away. And if I, so when, hopefully she'll come back in a second, but I'll just reiterate that if she mentions something technical that I don't pick up on, like these questions, please just write it in the chat. We'll definitely come back to it because I do like to explore those options. But
Chris, how would you describe the smell of this wine? Like it's really distinctive to me, but I don't know if I have the right language for it.
yeah,
I'm
I'm
back.
a little.
Oh.
Yeah, she's back. I'm a little handicapped on my scent now because I first did the nose on this an hour ago before I had a lot of garlic. So getting back to it now and putting it, I definitely have been polluted to it. But I was like doing my tasting notes originally during another business meeting, which was kind of funny.
Mm.
So Megan, you were just about to give us all your secrets away. And you cut out. You said so the Carmel Valley is in stainless steel, gets that round, and then for Clarksville, you said you stir it a few times during the winter just so you don't have acid water. Some neutral oak. What else are you doing to it to round it out?
That's it. That's all I mean by my toolbox. Like obviously a lot of like conventional winemakers actually have like a toolbox of a whole bunch of different additives that they can use in order to get the exact results that they're looking for. Whereas we have like different vessels for storage that we can use. We have different temperatures, like putting it inside or outside that we can use, or something physical that we can actually do to the wine. And in this case, it's stirring. So, all the lees sink, the solids of the wine lees sink to the bottom of the barrel, and it becomes like this muddy sludge. But if you kick that up and put a stick inside and stir it, then it becomes cloudy again, and those particles kind of remix in, and of course they're just going to fall out again. But that's why I do that for 6 weeks, because it does make a significant difference at that point. Whereas yes,
So you're
the
treating
Carmel
it like
Valley,
a snow globe, right? You're treating it like a snow globe. You're shaking it up, you're getting everything to float around. You're like, this is beautiful now.
that's a good analogy. Yeah, so whereas the Carmel Valley is almost the opposite, like I'm trying to tame it a little bit, and that's why I put it in stainless steel, because it's reductive, and meaning there's no oxygen contact like in a barrel, and that can help kind of make it so that those really intense aromatics and flavors aren't developing too much with the oxygen contact.
Yeah. So what do you? So when you taste your own wine here now, what do you get on the nose and on the flavor profile? How would you describe it?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Sorry. So when you taste the Carmel Valley, what do you get on like? So Mick asked for vocabulary on the nose. What do you smell and what do you taste when you drink this wine?
To me, it's very like fruity, like stone fruit and apples.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this character is as noticeable now that it's been in the bottle for a while. But in the spring, when this wine was released, I felt like I could smell salt, like the way that you would smell it at the ocean, not like the unpleasant brininess, but kind of the just a little bit of salt air, we'll say.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good description. Fantastic. And what did you find? What did you find was the difference in the vineyard with the old vines versus the younger vines of Clarksville? Do you manage the vineyard any differently when you're working with older vines?
So I don't manage either of these vineyards. I only farm a small vineyard in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and it's all red varietals. But I'm just starting to learn about Carmel Valley. Like one year isn't enough to have like a good grasp of a place, especially when you're making wine from it. So like Clarksburg going into year 5 now, I feel like I have a really good idea of what kind of wine that vineyard makes, and all the program that I use to create that wine is very I won't say specific because it's malleable, but I know exactly the results I'm going to get each time. Whereas Carmel Valley, I kind of threw that wine in stainless steel because I ran out of barrels, and I was like, should I buy more barrels, or is this the perfect wine to have in stainless? And it ended up being, I think, the perfect wine for stainless, but I'm going to make a little bit more of that this year. So it's possible I might do like 2/3 stainless and 1/3 neutral oak, just to experiment and see what I get from that. But in terms of like what the vineyards look like, they basically look pretty similar. Like the vines both look old, the trunks are thick, the vines are short in Carmel Valley. In Clarksburg, they're a little taller because they were planted to be used as bulk wine originally in the early 90s. And now that vineyard is only purchased by small quality producers, which is awesome. But we've got really, really long straight rows that were set up for like mechanized farming, whereas in Carmel Valley, this vineyard's really big in Carmel Valley. It's actually 88 planted acres, but there's only 3 acres of Chenin. But it's a lot. I don't want to say that it's done by hand, but you can tell that it was set up with like human labor in mind, more so than like the mechanized style of the Central Valley. Like rows are a little closer together, vines are shorter, like I said, and crop tends to be like quite a bit lighter, just because Carmel Valley is surprisingly cold. Just for people who don't know where it is, it's kind of the east side of Big Sur. So it's right over the Los Padres Mountains. It's about 1,500 feet, and it does get hot up there, but not for very long periods during the day. So even if it was a warm day, it'll really cool off at night because it's so close to the ocean. And that is the last. So like the difference between picking dates for Clarksburg Chenin and Carmel Valley Chenin is almost 2 months.
Yeah. So you started picking already this season.
I did. Yeah, I started picking Muscat on Monday, and it's now Thursday. And I'll probably pick Chenin on Monday or Tuesday because I'm sure everyone has seen the heat wave that's coming for the next 7 days. So the temperatures there are supposed to be like 109, 107 for almost 5 days in a row, which is not great to see. It's not going to affect quality. It's going to upset my own timeline.
Oh yeah. So how does that upset your timeline?
I think in general, most winemakers prefer like a later harvest start because it gives us more time to get prepared. And in my case, I am in the middle of opening my own winery, and the construction isn't finished yet, so I actually can't work in that space yet. So if these grapes come in on Monday, I don't know where I'm going to crush them, which makes it a very stressful situation. But also it's like, it's either me be stressed about not knowing what I'm going to do, or letting those grapes hang through that type of heat wave the whole time and possibly not getting to make the product that I was trying to. And it's like, which one is worse? Well, obviously one of them has much more long-term effects,
Yeah. So it is, I mean, it is definitely possible that a heat wave could impact the quality and the yield. if the grapes start to dry up from the sun exposure. That's definitely a risk, because some of the people up here in Sonoma where I live, like they'll monitor the weather almost like they're going to summit Everest, looking for that that time. Like, this is when we're going to pick, right? So it could be, especially if it's going to rain. If it's going to rain, that seems to be a big concern as well, to water down the grapes tremendously. And so, where are you making your wine right now as you're building your own?
I'm still using Ryan Sturm's facility, which is only 20 minutes from where my spot is. Because he hasn't, that's where I've been the last 2 vintages, and he hasn't started harvest yet and isn't as close, I don't think, as we are. So we're not in the way at all. James and I we're just didn't plan on that, but that's kind of how winemaking works, like you make a plan and then it just never goes quite how you wanted it to. And
Mike Tyson used to say everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, and that's what happened. So you're down in Watsonville at is it River Run? Is that the?
Yeah.
So that's where so my dog's name is River, so we have a cool photo there of so I've worked down there when we had Alex Pomerantz from Subject to Change on back in April, and he used to work out of that facility as well. So I've been there and have helped him bottle and do some work down there, which is it's a neat facility. It's my dog approves of it. It's River approved as well. Mick, did you have a question?
I did not. Sorry, I was waving to Bridget. She just got home, so she's going to join us right now.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. I wasn't sure if you were saying, you're like, I have a question, or if there was a fly, or
there's also
or
flies out here. Yeah, we're out in the forest, but yeah, no, I was just waving to Bridget. She's got home.
Yeah. Okay. So Megan, can you give us a little bit about your background? Like, how did you get into wine and all that from the beginning?
So I studied wine at UC Davis, and I went into the wine program right after I got out of high school, which is not what most people in that program do, at least at the time that I was there. Typically, it's folks who already work in the wine industry, and they can't really keep climbing the ladder until they go and get their wine degree. So I was at Davis at the same time as a lot of other people who work in natural wine in California.
Give us some names. Who are you? So who is the Davis clique that you're hanging out with at the time? It's like you're 18 years old at this point, or 19 years old, just out of high school. Can't even drink yet. Hanging out with the future natural wine wonders of California. Who is this group?
Yeah, but I mean, by the time that I met this crew, I was 20 or 21, so much older. Yeah, it was. So Sean and Diego of Le Lune were there, and also Sam Barron, which is their former partner in Populous, and Martha Stuman was there. Brett of Cote West, based in Oakland, was there. Meredith, also last name Bell, just coincidence, she owns Soterra in Oregon. She was there. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot of people. There was a lot of people there at the same time. And I think that was a big influencer of not necessarily like getting into natural wine for me, but feeling like other people I knew had been able to start their companies and being like, oh, well, if they could do it, then I can probably do that too. Like, why not?
So Sean actually spoke highly of Davis as well. He was here a couple months ago too. So then what was it that got you into natural wine as opposed to a conventional path?
For me, it was about how I was treated at work. I hated working in the wine industry. In my first couple internships, I'm still the only woman, but I'm a lot more comfortable now in that space. Whereas then I wasn't, I was 21 or 22 and working with all men who didn't think that I could do anything. And I felt like every day I was just confirming to them that I couldn't do anything because I was learning. And that's how it feels when you're learning something,
Yeah, totally.
Which happens to everyone regardless of their gender. But there's this just kind of idea buzzing around in those types of like ultra masculine workplaces that like you're just kind of wasting your time because you're not like a white dude, because you're never going to be able to climb the wine industry ladder. So like, why are you even here? And everyone's just constantly watching you, like waiting for you to make mistakes. And I did make mistakes all the time, but so did they. But when I made a mistake, everyone was like, yeah, there she goes again. But like,
it was a gender
expected her to fail.
Yeah. And what we're seeing now in the world is really interesting is that it's not unique to wine, right? It's not like the wine industry. Like I would say it's not like the wine industry, I think, because it's wine discriminates. Like every industry discriminates against women that way in some way, in fashion, totally unfairly, totally uncalled for, and we're starting to see that surface up more and more, which is I think a positive thing. One thing I'm very conscious when I look at what I'm putting out every month. I'm very conscious to say that's I want female winemakers or a diversity of winemakers in my club all the time, and there's plenty of good ones out there that I don't have to sacrifice quality for what I'm looking for because they're there. You just have to find them sometimes. So totally. So what we're saying, are there any, do you have any like horror stories you tell after like a drink or two about how they treated you?
Yeah.
Fuck
What?
Fuck them.
Yeah, you're allowed to curse on this, so it's okay. This is a 21 and over thing. Yeah, you can say fuck them. That's totally cool.
Probably in the internship that I'm thinking of in particular, which was my first like full-time internship after college. It was a long one. We had usually you work harvest for like 2 or 3 months. This internship was like 6 months. So I worked with all men, and like my boss and everybody saw me every day in my work clothes, and I feel like I look pretty different depending on what I'm wearing, but all I did was change my clothes. But we were celebrating the end of harvest, and everyone had a couple of drinks and like gotten oysters, and then on the way back out, walking through the parking lot, my boss put his arm around me and was like, talking to another guy, like, oh, she's pretty good looking after all. And just because I was wearing normal clothes and not my work clothes, I assume. And that's just a tiny thing. There's so many worse things that have happened, but I feel like that coming from your boss, who like, I didn't think of him as a friend. At the time, he felt a lot older than me. I think he was like in his mid-30s, which now would be like whatever. But then I was like, oh, this man is like 15 years older than me. I respect him, and like I want to learn from him. And yeah, to be like so casually kind of tossed off like that, like I had never even considered while I was working that anyone was thinking of me like that, because I was working.
Yeah. And you wonder, like, why did he put his arm around a guy too who's probably just as dirty, probably had a cap on backwards or whatever the whole time, and be like, oh, he dresses up pretty good. Like, I mean, it would be inappropriate both ways, but the point of getting that singled out, it's terrible. It's like not like you're gonna work harvest in heels and lipstick. It's like not gonna happen.
Yeah. So that was my experience in like the conventional realm of winemaking, and it wasn't until I started working at more natural focused places that I was treated like a human, which is why I decided to keep doing this path. It wasn't because I was like particularly interested in natural wine. Like, I've always been into organic farming and small scale farming and produce and stuff, but I didn't really care what type of wine it was really. Like I had just finished a degree in something and I was a young person and I kind of wanted to work wherever, you know, and
Mhm.
it just happened that these small wineries doing native fermentation and focused on organics and stuff were just like decent people. And that's why I stayed in that realm.
Yeah, and I think that's a valuable lesson too, because I mean, I talk to a lot of consumers of natural wine, and people are consumers for different reasons as well. Some it's for environmental, some it's for processing because it's organic, some because it's trendy. There's a lot of reasons why people get there, and
Mm-hmm.
but most of the time it's because it aligns to their value system. And if that's how you arrived here, because they were cool, nice people making interesting wine, I think that's a very cool way of arriving at the same place of other people, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think so. Oh, go ahead.
I just
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
question.
go ahead.
I mean, so now we know why you got involved with natural wine, but why, as a high school senior, did you decide that you wanted to study winemaking? It seems like you acknowledge not a lot of people that do that. So what was it for you? Did you have like family or?
No, it was actually the person I was dating at the time. He had graduated college before I started and had a lot of time on his hands because it was 2008. So he like wasn't getting jobs, and we decided to like get really into brewing beer. So we brewed ton of beer together and visited breweries and were quite knowledgeable about it. And we decided, I think it was his idea really, but he was like, let's start a joint winery brewery. Like, I'm not getting jobs. Like, it seemed so easy as like a 17 or 18-year-old, and he was like, I don't know, 21 or something. And he's like, yeah, I'll do the beer, and you just need to go to college to do. Um, so that's why I went. And then obviously the relationship didn't last, so I had to keep finding reasons to continue that program. And the main thing for me, I think, was that it was going to lead directly to an outdoor career, which I've always been an outdoor person. And I used to teach like nature and backpacking for kids. And that's really what I wanted to do. But there was no money in that. And I've always known that I wanted to like attempt to have money because I didn't grow up like that. And my mom was always like, you're someone who likes money. And I was like, no, I don't like, and I don't think I am, except when like I love going out to dinner and nice wine and things like that. But I'm happy to not buy like new clothing or new anything for 5 or 10 years. But yeah, I had seen my boyfriend at the time and my other friends who had graduated college just totally stagnant because they weren't getting hired. And I wanted to do a degree in English because that's kind of what I'm more interested in naturally. But I was like, oh, if you do English, you're just going to sit around. Like, why even do that? Uh, so that's why
This is
uh,
it started.
yeah, I was like,
It's the classic story of the boyfriend has the idea, and the girlfriend far exceeds in success what the goal was. So you're like, oh, what happened to him?
yeah. So I
So
was like, oh, if I do wine, like I'll have this specific career. And like little did I know that there's also no money in wine production. Absolutely not. I could have been a nature instructor, but you have to own something.
So, but we had, we had Tony Couturier on a few months ago as well, and he said, you're not going to make a lot of money doing this, but you're going to have a very rich, rewarding life, and
Yeah.
that's so that was he. I heard that it's like somebody who's in the twilight of his career, really looking back on it with a lot of fondness. So, and you're sort of in the early stages of yours, mid stages, really, I guess.
Early. Let's say early.
So, yeah. or early. Well, I'm saying mid because you're past the beginner part. You're getting your own facility. It was not an age related. I guess it sounded that way. But now you get. So tell us about your own facility. Is there going to be how big is it going to be? Are there going to be any can people visit? Because we're going to be doing when this shit's done. We're doing class trips. we're bringing we're bringing groups down to go meet in person again and go visit, people like yourself, whatever. So tell us about this facility. What's it going to be? What's going to be like? What's the opportunities available?
Yeah, I think James and I are both very excited about getting to host groups and people and everything when the time comes.
James?
So James owns Flores Wines, and he is my business partner in this winery space. He's not my business partner in Margins. We're totally independent wineries. We just couldn't build out a warehouse space and permit everything as one person. It costs a fortune to do this. And we're both around 30, and we don't have the ability to take on something like this by ourselves quite yet. And like for me, I never wanted my own winery facility. I love working collectively. I'm not super into like hanging out in a group at the facility the way that the guys that I've worked with in the past have been. Like I like to go and work and have other people around and then leave. But I don't have any desire to like go to the winery to work and always know that I'll be by myself. So I think it's kind of great to be able to share your own winery space. And for me, this always was my ultimate goal. And there's no business goal beyond this for me, which is super exciting. I have a lot of personal goals, like be able to afford food, and maybe like get to go on vacation and stuff.
Very, very low Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Just like some basic things. I love it. But will the facility have a name?
I think we're gonna have to work on it. So unfortunately, kind of, the facility, the winery is on a street called Freedom Boulevard, and so it keeps kind of being called the Freedom Winery, and I was like, no, we cannot refer to it as that. So like what we named our calendar for now is the Freedom for All Winery, which I came up with. But I don't want to keep it named that. So we're going to have to come up with something.
So it's TBD. Normally we'd say the name's subject to change, but that's been taken too. So now it's TBD. So you're going to have TBD, and I can draw the org chart if you'd like. TBD with Flores and Margins underneath. Is there going to be a tasting room, or is it going to be like we'll pour out of the warehouse?
No, there will not be a tasting room. We were both really just looking for a production facility. Like we've been working in Ryan Sturm's facility, but it's only 2,500 square feet, which is very small to share with 4 companies. So our new spot is 2,800 square feet inside and 1,500 square feet outside. So it's quite large for 2 people. Like meaning we really have room to grow into it, and we're going to be in that space for probably 5 to 10 years together, and one of us will probably keep it for the remainder of our career. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's just like, you're like, one of you's got to, like, it's nice going into business where in 5 years or 10 years, but one of you got to go. Right.
Yeah, but it's so big, meaning tall. The ceiling is really tall, so you can stack barrels really, really high, and that's the type of thing that ends up taking a lot of space in the winery. So without that being a concern, we kind of have infinite space in that spot, which at least it seems like it now. And it's hard to imagine a time when like we've bulked up our production so much that we are filling up that whole space. But who knows? But yeah, no, it's very hard to permit wineries in certain counties, and Santa Cruz County is one of them. It's close to the coast, and there's a lot of water concern here. And it's full of like agriculture. So the way that you dispose of industrial process water is really regulated, and so it's taken us, we were really lucky, about 7 months of permitting. It took the brewery across the street 4.5 years of permitting because they have a tasting room. And then there's a winery about a mile down the road that they took 2.5 years because they have a tasting room. So we were like, no on the tasting room. It's just gonna add time. And like, we don't really care about that. That's not quite our business model, you know? Like we're not gonna hire someone to work in the tasting room for us. And also like, we probably don't wanna be the ones like working in the tasting room on the weekend. And we're much more focused in like the outer wine world. I feel like being involved in restaurants and in cities and places that are kind of on the cutting edge of wine and food, whereas a lot of like wine regions in California, Santa Cruz included, are so hyper local. Like they sell almost all of their wine direct, which is great for their business because you get way more money, but they're not relevant in the greater market. So you kind of have to decide.
Well, it's an interesting question, is how much is that relevance important to you?
Yeah. I mean, for me, like I would rather like sell my wine direct through like an online mailing list and get to meet people at tastings that I pour at where they're meeting me and I get to meet them, instead of having them come to my tasting room and meet an employee who might be a good friend if you're really lucky, but probably not. Like my friends don't want to make $20 an hour, you know, like not that there isn't a place for everyone and that those people can't do a good job. Like I've worked in lots of tasting rooms and I felt like I did a great job, but it's never going to be the same as hearing it from the person that made it.
Yeah. So I guess is relevance to you then being connected to all of your consumers or being prominent in the industry, or both?
Connected to consumers for sure. Yeah. And I think once you have a tasting room, like you're making so much money that you have more of an excuse to check out. Or at least that's what I've seen with a lot of people that I worked for. They're like, okay, like I'm going on vacation again. And their market is excited about them as the maker and producer and kind of goes to the tasting room with this thought like, ooh, maybe they'll be there. But like they're never there because they're not connected to it anymore. And I want to maintain that connection. I don't want to just be the owner who's like way on the outside, like never helping clean the tanks, never like being around for the hard stuff, including like how hard it is to work in service and tasting. Like I want to be there through all of it, not as like a micromanager, but as a team member with whoever works with me one day.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like my personal goal when people drink the wines that are in the club and stuff like that, like I want people to hold up a bottle like this and be like, hey, this is Megan's wine. It's Margin's label, right? I want them to know the producer, to associate the producer name with the label like that, not as one of those like, oh, this is like I'm drinking this wine and who makes it? Like I don't know. It's like some company or something behind it. That you know, my hope is that everyone's like, you know, like they'll try this vintage or they'll try the Carmel Valley through me, and then buy direct from them or through me. I mean, like that part's, you know, not as important to me, but I want people to make the connection between the winemaker and the brand like that. It's obviously much easier if it's named after, like if it's like Martha Stewman wine, right? That makes it pretty easy.
Gonna say
That makes it pretty easy. You know, but in some winemakers that we have, that you know they have multiple labels for different reasons as well. You know, so next week we're having Laura Brendan Bissell on, and she has Incanu and La La Lu, so she's got a few different labels as well. She's another badass woman of wine who I absolutely love. But that's what I want people to make the connection with, is make the connection to actually the person behind it, not the label.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Bridget. Go ahead.
Megan, I had a question for you about Margins. How did you pick this name? Is Is it like the margins in a book?
No, so originally it was about the margins of society. More of
Oh,
a,
the fringe.
yeah, more of a literary facet, because English is more my thing than wine, actually. I love wine, but I'm not interested in wine the way that other people who work in the wine industry are. I am interested in lots of other things, equally to wine, if not more. And I love the work that I do to make wine, but I'm not as interested in learning about like wine regions and how to say them correctly and stuff. So I did not go to college for English, but I ended up getting an English minor, which helped me get through all of the horrible chemistry that was associated with my degree, which I like wasn't really expecting for whatever reason. And I've never been I've always been pretty good academically, but I've never been nearly as strong in math and science as I have with writing. And that's just, I think, what you're interested in. And I've always loved reading. So it started as like a reference to my favorite literary group, the Modernists, like some of the first gay and lesbian writers in the 20s, and kind of the people that were on the edge of their own little movements at a time when people weren't really out about that. It's always been really interesting to me. And then the concept evolved over time into comparing it more to vineyards. So I work with vineyards, regions, and varietals that are lesser known or on the margins. So that's what I say publicly. I don't usually talk about like the English thing because it's a little too out there for a lot of people who are like, what's the margins of society? But that's where that's where the name came from originally.
Oh, that's brilliant. But it's actually, to your literary background, it's a little bit of a double entendre, I guess, to margins of a book, if you like that as well. And the other reason why I super like that now is that, you know, there's a lot of people make analogies to natural wine, and obviously being on the margins of what most of the wine world is. And, you know, a lot of people are like, well, natural wine's like the punk rock or this or that. And the analogy I've always liked about natural wine, particularly in America, is I've always equated it to the beatniks, particularly because of its prominence in California with the California makers. And our proximity to hanging out and being able to meet people like you and, you know, hanging out when they come at Brumaire and everything like that is like, and I always like at a City Lights bookstore in San Francisco is I'm like, this is to me the closest thing like to hanging out with the beatniks in the 50s would be. On the margins, on the fringe of an industry, is that having the access to the people just because you're in proximity to them, that's one of the fun things about the industry for me.
Yeah, it does.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it does feel a lot more accessible, even to me as someone who's in it, than here in California than it feels when you're in, say, like Boston or New York, where you're like, oh, that is so far away. And like, it was really hard for me to get my East Coast distribution cracking because only there twice a year, and like, it's almost as close to Europe as it is to California. And it's like, who are you going to be more interested in? Like, probably Europe, only because it's foreign, you know? Whereas in California, I feel like things took off so fast because I live here and I got to see people all the time. And I think just like other people who live here being like, oh, she's from the Bay Area. So even if we never met in person, we have something in common, something we can connect to. And I agree. That is what people are looking for, it seems like, with wine. I know that it's definitely what I'm looking for. And it's part of why I'm not as interested in like learning about new wines, is because I really want to meet the person. The wine is almost irrelevant.
And you went to school with most of them, which is really cool too. I was so much younger than them though. I wanted to ask, because we love wine art here. So who drew the label? Where did the label come from? This label is beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I wish that the person who drew it had a website or any desire to make money off of their art, but they do not. Um, the art is by my friend Buddy, who lives in Oakland, and his brother was my first love. So we have known each other a very long time, and we're the same age, and we've always been friends. And when I moved to Oregon for my favorite wine internship, the first kind of natural-ish winery that I worked at in 2013, I didn't have anywhere to live when I got there, and I stayed with him for almost a month while I was kind of getting my feet on the ground in Oregon. And that was when I like really saw all of his art. I knew that he was an artist because I knew him when we were kids, and he actually went to Davis for a little bit, but I had never like been in his house where I could go through all of his drawings and stuff. And it was just really astounding. He has an incredible talent, and now he works in construction in Oakland and just makes art on the side. And sometimes we'll like set up a little free booth in Lake Merritt with little knickknacks and such, but doesn't have an art website and doesn't want one. So
It's beautiful. I mean, is there any story behind the image?
yeah, so Buddy, when I was first conceiving Margins, I knew that I wanted him to do the art just because I felt like he was such an important part of my wine journey. Like part of why I loved Oregon so much was because I got to land there and have a friend group kind of right away. And the internship that I did in Oregon changed my entire path because I worked with these wonderful people at that winery. And then I never kind of went back after that. So he came to my house when we talked about him designing the label, and he just had like his big canvases with him, and every day I would go to work and he would work all day on the drawing, and then I'd come home and we would edit it together and decide what we wanted to change. And at the end of 3 days, that is what we had. And he perfectly captured my idea, which was to try to show like nature taking back over something man-made, the way that natural wine is taking back over conventional wine.
Love it.
So cool.
Yeah, I think that's the story that someone like me needs that story explained to them on the label. You know, like I kind of get it. I'm like, okay, the tree's coming out, the birds are in the rooftop, but that's the kind of explanation that someone like me needs. Like you have to be like, hey, this is what it is. And then I'm like, I mean, I appreciated the craftsmanship before, but knowing the story helps me appreciate it even more.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm thinking about adding a blurb or something publicly so that people can learn about it, but it's so hard when someone wants their privacy, you know? Especially someone who's so talented, and so many people have asked, like, how can we support this artist? Can we commission this artist? And he's like, nah.
That's why I always ask about the art and the artist. And in fact, we've had a few artists on, and I should have didn't just, bad host. I know you probably would have said no, or he would have said no. I normally ask the winemaker if they want to bring the artist on with them to talk about it themselves. So sounds like that would have been no.
Yeah, I mean, he's okay. So interesting because he never got paid for that. Because when I started with a $10,000 Kickstarter, and I didn't have any extra money, and I just told him that I would give him wine for like the remainder of my business. So every once in a while, I'd just drop off a case of wine, and
so he got paid for it.
I still feel horrible. Like, we need to support artists with money, like not trade.
100% agree. 100% agree. Bridget works at a gallery. She'll agree. So yeah. So this is one of my other goals is to actually connect the artists with it. Like that's why I usually ask the question about the labels as well. Mm-hmm. I wanted to get back to something you said earlier about, you said, tasting rooms, not your business model. So part of, given what's going on this year and all the restaurants being closed, how is business going? Is it up, down, sideways, the same? What's business like from?
For me, it's the same. The timing of things changed a bit. Because like the East Coast in March, everyone canceled their orders.
Yeah.
Or almost everyone, because it was totally shut down. And like that wine ended up selling later because they took it in the summer once things were a little more open. But usually I would expect to have all that money months ago, whereas some of it I don't even have yet. And that really affects like my cash flow, because like this time of year I'm about to spend tons of money on grapes, and I really need all that money sitting in the account. But also I'm not big enough where I keep inventory. Like everything that I make sells out within a week or two, and whatever doesn't sell, I kind of divvy it up to all the wholesale markets. And my goal is to I don't like to keep anything lying around, because yeah, I can make more money from the web store, but it's not really about that for me. Like I'm not really into old wine. So like I don't want my wines to be drank old. I want them to be drank in the year that after they were produced. So getting them out there.
And I will just add that I think I got the last allocation from the distributor of this wine.
Yeah, you did.
I think I actually ordered more than they were able to ship me, because it was so tight. So I was like, okay, this is what I want here.
Yeah, and you know, I think I'm really lucky to be in the position that I'm in, which is the markets that I have can take double or triple what they're getting now. But what's been my bottleneck was not having the space to produce that. And now I finally have my own space and I'm going to be able to grow. But this 1 year is kind of a lag period, because all that money is invested in building out the space. So I'm not going to be able to grow this year at the rate that like one would hope. But next year is looking good. Next year is looking like a year where I don't have to be on food stamps and I can afford to pay myself more than $700 a month.
There you go.
So, goals, you know.
Cheers for that. So I guess what is the, so we talked about a lot of things. I mean, we talked about the sexism in natural wine. We talked about how you got into natural wine. But when it comes to the natural wine world, what you're doing, what's the most interesting topic to you?
Definitely people. Like I almost feel like organic farming, or like trying to convert something to organics, is a given. Like no one should necessarily be commended for that at this point. I do not work with all organic vineyards. Just I'm all about the transparency, but I'm on a path with those people. And like it's hard to convert like people who have been doing things a certain way for a really long time into this new model that isn't necessarily harder or more expensive for them. It's just different. Like people learn how to do something one way and then they do it that way forever. And pulling them out of that.
And by the way, and you bring up a good point, because and because you don't work with all organic producers. You do have some you do source some conventionally produced grapes, and I think that's. Go ahead.
Yeah, nothing's conventional. Like I'm working with people who are 1 or 2 steps removed from being completely organic.
Okay, so fair enough. So not conventional, but
yeah.
Good quote. Well, but I think that's it's an important, because one of the things that you saw in the email I sent out today with your tech sheet, I really appreciate the transparency of your tech sheets, but I also like to say, like, I appreciate it, because if helping you or supporting you through the wine club helps you get to those other farmers to get there, I think that's the right step to do. There are some people in this industry, and one of the things that drives me nuts is that people are like dogmatic. You're like, they're like, oh, some of that wine's not all organic, so we can't buy any of it. And I just think that's bullshit, right? But there are people in the industry who act like that. So I think supporting the people who are heading in the right direction is the right way to go, which is what I do. So, but I also I 100% appreciate that you are transparent. You're like, yeah, I'm trying to get there, and I could do it with some of the things I do, but I can't do it with all of it. So that's
and I'm going to be able to do it with all of them eventually. Right. It's just every year I have 1 or 2 more converts, And sometimes it's a misunderstanding. Like I just learned yesterday that a vineyard that I thought was going to be organic this year, because we had a discussion last year about how you cannot fertilize with non-organic compounds and have it be organic. I was like, so just confirming one more time that you did not fertilize. He's like, oh no, I did. I used the same thing as last year. Like, okay. But it's things like that, and they happen over and over. But that's why I said relationships, like, that's just a person. He had a whole different career. He's not a farmer. Like, he didn't know, you know? He needs a little bit of guidance, maybe over and over again, to be like, hey, like, you are so close. Like, you've been not spraying herbicides for 10 years. Amazing. Like, you're only using sulfur and other gentle control for powdery mildew. Like, we don't need to throw in these conventional fertilizers, you know? But someone probably told him at some point that he needed to do that, so he just keeps doing it.
And you bring up, like, I think the dark secret of California natural wine is everyone sprays sulfur. You know, it's like pretty much. I mean, you almost have to. There's all, like, mildew is always a problem, and it's really hard to control mildew without, which is not sulfites, but it's spraying sulfur, and almost everyone does it, but very few people talk about it.
Really? Oh, I didn't know it was I didn't know it was a secret. I guess because we talk about it so much because we all farm vineyards, so like we talk about it openly.
Yeah, I think farmers talk about it openly, but I think when it comes to distributors and retailers and people, like, this mythology of what natural wine is, that, like, nothing ever touch it, like it's organically farmed grapes and nothing ever touches it, and I'm like, no, everyone sprays with sulfur.
And for people who don't know, so we're spraying sulfur as the element S, not sulfur dioxide or another sulfur compound. And actually, you don't have to spray sulfur. There's other controls, but they're quite a bit more expensive. So actually, this year, the vineyard that I farm, we didn't spray sulfur at all because we had such an issue with it last year, because it can end up becoming other compounds in the wine once it meets with the water in the wine, and things bind, and you know, you get hydrogen sulfide, rotten egg smell, and it just becomes kind of a disaster. But it is absolutely crucial in most of California that you're spraying something for mildew control, and especially where I am in Santa Cruz, like the vines are wet every morning because there's so much fog. And if we just left them, we wouldn't have grapes. Like, they would all be totally dehydrated. They would have a little slit in them, a little scar, and then no juice, because that's what happens with powdery mildew, which is the main issue that you have in humid areas of California. But so I just want to go back to what you're saying about like these mystical realms in the wine industry, and like this idea that just because one person works with one non-organic vineyard means you can't support them at all. Like, that used to really bother me, like not being invited to these various events or into these spaces in the Bay Area was extremely hurtful. And it's also hard to separate it out from sexism when you see that the people that are invited are all men. But working with the men that I work with now, I was able to see that it's not directed at just me. Like, it is very much a dogmatic philosophy, and it doesn't matter who it applies to. If you're not this thing, meaning you're not, only organic vineyards, only 0.0 wine, you don't get to come. And that doesn't really annoy me more. I just find it truly absurd, because the only way you could say that really is if you have made wine, if you've had the experience of doing it, because you'll see that it's so insignificant, right? Like, all of the decisions that we make over a year to make this wine, adding sulfur is just a tiny decision, and it is almost negligible compared to so many other decisions. Like, one of the things I really like to ask those folks, who are some of them friends of mine, do you add CO2, carbon dioxide? people who make natural wine love to put carbon dioxide on or in their wine for temperature control or to keep oxygen off of the wine. And to me, there's no difference there between adding sulfur and adding CO2. Like
Yeah,
they're
well,
both
and some people like to use dry ice too, right?
yeah, dry ice CO2.
Yeah, and then CO2. But I think that's what you meant. Yeah, so the dry ice part of it is like, what's natural about what? Yeah, so what's natural about adding dry ice to
Yeah.
get carbonic maceration?
And the
but I
answer
think,
is that. Go ahead.
good. No, but this is we're here to listen to you.
So for me, that like framing it like that makes it clear how insignificant it is. Like, should we ding people for using dry ice? No, like it doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't believe in temperature control. For me, I think dry ice / temperature control is more of a modification than using sulfur dioxide.
Yeah.
So,
Well, but also what we were originally talking about, if you had like not conventional grapes, but not organic grapes in bins next to organic grapes. That was really the real. But then the other part of it is because you worked in a co-op, that there are a number of people who work in co-ops where some co-ops have people who try to use native yeast and others have people who inoculate. And to a lot of people, that's like an absolute no go. So what are your thoughts on that?
That makes a little more sense to me because, like, if you're inoculating, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Like, every single fermentation, even a native fermentation, is going to be the added yeast because
yeast is like glitter at a party. Everyone's getting it.
Yeah, it just takes over. Whereas deciding to use those like temperature control or sulfur dioxide, obviously that's not affecting other people. But yeah, it's just one small decision, and also like this isn't it, to me it shouldn't be about like just the wine. Like all the work that person did to bring that product to life, and in our industry, you know, it's so much more labor than in conventional wine because it really is touched by someone's hands over and over again instead of just machinery, which it is in conventional wine. A lot of times people are barely present for a lot of conventional winemaking. It's just wine sitting in a tank and it gets machined to all over the place, you know? So to me, it just kind of ignores or negates all of the passion and the time that it took someone to make that and bring it to someone, and then to just discount it because they added 20 parts of SO2, which could have occurred naturally too. It's like, like why? Why does it matter? What about the person? You know?
This has been fantastic, and I want to be conscious of your time because I know we only skipped for an hour. We ran started a little late, ran a little over. But does anyone have any final questions for Megan?
I do.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So is your winery like it's just going to be for you producing it, or is there its actual vineyard? Because you said you're at other vineyards, kind of.
Yeah. So the winery is separate from the vineyards. So the winery is just a production space, and then I have one vineyard that's about 40 minutes away that I co-farm with the owner, and then I buy from 8 other vineyards.
Oh.
But I'm helping, in almost all the cases, helping pick and then transporting those grapes on a truck that I drive to Santa Cruz and then making all the wine at the location.
Cool.
Wow.
Just curious, because you were like, oh, I like collective, you know, and that you're gonna have so much space. I wonder if you'll have, you know, people in your space that are new winemakers maybe to be in the winery, or no?
That's a good question. My business partner wants yes and I want no, but we have it split down the middle so he can do whatever he wants on his side.
It sounds like a perfect opportunity for you to take on some young female producers from UC Davis who don't want to work with creepy dudes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to offer mentorship to people who don't wouldn't normally have a chance, and also specific hiring practices for internships and stuff. But I don't feel right, honestly. It has to do with money. Like, I don't want to charge someone the money that it would require to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Let's all give him a round of applause. And all right. So